Hello, folks. I'm back on hosting duties this week. I took over the past couple of months hosting. As you can see, I'm joined by Dan and Steve today. I'm also joined by a very special guest. But before we get into the content, I wanted to introduce our special guest. So someone who's actually worked for BBC, Sky Sports. I think you even lived in South Africa for a couple of years as well, just before the World Cup as well. So I imagine that your ears must have bled after hearing all those vuvuzelas in South Africa during the World Cup. But we're joined by the Guardian's very own sports deputy news editor, Ed Aarons. Ed, thank you for joining us today.
Nice one. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, before we actually get started as well, sorry, I just wanted to touch more on that. South Africa, explain that. Explain, like, was it just purely for the World Cup, or did you have like a burning desire to go live there?
I've always been really interested in South Africa as a country, and it was, I mean, to be honest, it was because of the World Cup. Like, about a year before, maybe like 2 years before, I started getting to know a few South African players and like doing a few articles about them, like in the build up to it. And then I thought it would be a good opportunity to get over there. And I've always kind of wanted to live somewhere in Africa as when I was growing up. I don't know, just I've been interested in the continent. And it was just like a big opportunity.
Sure.
And it was a great experience. I loved it. But you're right, the vuvuzelas were a bit too much. But everyone hated them, but I was so used to them because I went to all the games, like in the local games before. I kind of, it was just part of the experience. But you know what?
Oh, okay.
The other day, my dog ate my vuvuzela from South Africa.
that's probably 10 years too late, man.
Yeah,
So,
I know.
Yeah, he did you a favor.
Been up there for 10 years, And
so where do you rank that World Cup alongside some of the other ones that you've seen? Because I don't know, like I think the first World Cup that I like vividly remember is probably 2002. I know, like Steve will claim that he's got some great memories from '98, but
no, wait,
I don't know. I don't know how much I believe him. But yeah, I think 2010 is probably one of the like I don't know. Probably I'll rank it one of the lowest, like quality wise, ones that I enjoyed the most of the World Cup that I've seen. So how would you rank that?
Yeah, the quality was not brilliant overall. I went to 18 games of that, and I went to I saw Spain quite a lot, and obviously they were a great team, pretty boring to watch. I think that kind of summed up the tournament. But yeah, I mean, my favorite tournament is probably way back, like 1990, and we're probably going to talk about that later. But England getting to the semi-final and beating Cameroon and. Just not just that, just the Italian 90. I don't know, if people of my sort of age is like a really special World Cup. And also I really enjoyed the 2002 World Cup, which was like really early starts for everyone. And England had a good team then as well, and never mind. Quarterfinals as usual.
England doing what they do best.
Yeah.
Can I just defend my honor, Dan? I've never said I remember anything about France '98 other than Beckham getting sent off. That much I remember vividly. But Ed, I wanted to ask you actually, how's it been working with the different companies you've been? Because obviously BBC government owned, and you've got Sky, obviously backed by Rupert Murdoch, and then obviously now you're at the Guardian. How have you found this sort of different environments? Have they been very different in terms of the sort of priorities and how you have to work, or have they quite been similar?
No, it's an interesting question actually. Yeah, they are quite different. And for the BBC, I was freelancing, so it was very much I had to find stuff, which is quite a good challenge, if you're doing that sort of thing. I've been a freelancer back in England as well, but yeah, it was very much more sort of rigid, especially with TV. I was working in production in Sky Sports News in the background kind of thing, and it was like, it runs like clockwork, as you can imagine, and like, very, very well organised. But the Guardian is very well organised as well. But I have a bit more freedom, I think. Like when I go to a tournament, say like, and all the other papers are there, they kind of have to write every day, about what player gets put up by England, and I have to do an England story every day. But at the Guardian, it's kind of like, well, you can do something different if there's something a bit more interesting, or it doesn't have to be about an English player, or it can be about kind of a bit more of a global view, I think. I think that's kind of how I'd sum it up. So yeah, but it is quite different. I have to say, I think most people who work in mainstream media, as everyone's going on about at the moment, would agree it's there's quite a big difference between where you work. But kind of especially in newspapers, everyone kind of does in sport newspapers anyway. Like we kind of try to work together as much as we can when we're at games and stuff, So.
Oh.
Well, yeah. Thanks for that, Ed. We may as well get straight into sort of the thick of it. So, obviously, you've just recently brought out a book earlier this month, based around sort of the African players, the history around the African players to play in England. And I think what we wanted to do is we wanted to sort of center the podcast around not just the book per se, but also around some of these African players who've actually graced the league. So the first question I actually wanted to ask was there one player in particular who was sort of like the trigger point for you to say, okay, you know what, this topic is so fascinating, I need to actually write a book about it?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say there was a couple. If I start from start from the beginning.
You got to pick carefully.
Yeah,
here.
for a more contemporary. I mean, hopefully we could get a chance to talk about some of the really early characters, like way back characters, like we're talking about in the 19th century. That's where the book begins. Yeah. But in terms of the Premier League, it was definitely the first player in the Premier League, the African player in the Premier League, which was Peter Ndlovu, or Ndlovu, I think that's how they say it in Zimbabwe, and played for Coventry and Sheffield United, Birmingham. But really, it was at Coventry that he was just unbelievable and really captured my imagination as a sort of like 11, 12-year-old kid. And really, a lot of people at that time will remember some of the goals he scored. He scored a hat-trick at Anfield, which was the first time an opposition player had done that for like 30 years. He was absolutely wonderful to watch, like really skillful. And it was him. And then sort of going through, there are a few other people like Tony Yeboah was really influential to me when I was a kid as well. Like, because I like to watch him. Those goals, everyone remembers those 2 goals in a few days.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Absolutely,
Jack Hammer.
Yeah. And then kind of from those guys, I wanted to sort of tell their stories, the early guys, and then in the modern era, I really love. Particularly, I have to admit, I love Sadio Mane in particular. He's like wonderful. I keep saying wonderful, but yeah, he's an amazing player. And obviously Salah as well. And just the way it all came together in that season, 2018-19, with 3 African players sharing the Golden Boot with Aubameyang as well of Arsenal. And just the number of African players that are shining every week for Premier League teams at the moment is just amazing, really. So that was kind of bringing it all together. I thought it was about time that we recognised all the contribution that these people have made.
Yeah, because I've actually read I've read some of the book as well, and like you said as well, because I think that the thing that sort of surprised me was how far back you took it, like you said earlier on. So it wasn't just a case of JJ Okocha. You were talking about the likes of like Viv Anderson and so on and so forth, like some of these players who we don't even know that have already paved the way for the likes of your JJ Okochas, to your Kanus, and then to obviously your eventuals, Sadio Mane and Mo Salah. Like, we're talking about sort of like the trendsetters who actually sort of came here and sort of bucked the trend. And there was a bit you mentioned in your book about a bunch of sort of Nigerians who came on a tour back in sort of like 1940, I think it was like 1940, 48, 49. And there was a quote you put in your book about some of like the racial abuse they were receiving, and it sounded horrific. But then I'm looking at football in the last 3-4 years, and some of the stuff I see on social media, it's no different to what they were experiencing probably around, how many years ago is that, like 70, 80 years ago. So what I was going to ask here is, do you think that the perceptions of African players in English football has changed that much over the years, even with all these stars and whatnot who have captured all these hearts in England? Do you think that the perception of African players has changed?
Yeah, I think it has, but as you say, during the course of writing this book, I have to say, like, I thought that English football had not got it right, but was definitely heading in the right direction, and it was quite a healthy sort of place, and that racism that we saw people like Viv Anderson experienced in the 70s and 80s, and in the early 90s as well. People like Peter and Love got racially abused even then, and in that sort of era. But I thought that it was kind of that was gone. But the last few years have shown us that, especially on social media, but not just on social media, that it's still quite, it does exist, and it's really, really sad to see that, I think. But yeah, going back to the early days, like these guys who came in, the first one was in the 19th century, and some of the language, Arthur Wharton, his name was, who's from Ghana.
That's the
from quite a well-to-do family, actually. His mother was a Fante princess, like the Ghanaian royal family, and his dad was like a missionary from the West Indies. He had quite a well-to-do background, but when he arrived in England, he even newspapers were using racial language against him. So obviously we've moved on from that a bit, but there's still that issue there with some of the media anyway. But and then later on in the book, we've got players in the 50s and 60s, Steve McConey, Albert Johansson, Jerry Francis, who were both at Leeds, the last two, and lots of horrible racism, from on the pitch as well, directly from players, which hopefully that kind of thing, you do hear of it now. Still, there are some incidents. Look at Jonathan Lecco. Was it Charlton, wasn't he? With Leeds goalkeeper. So those kind of things, unfortunately, still are here. But I think back in the day, it was every time they stepped on the pitch, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, do you think? Because of course it was quite horrific back then, but I feel like another way in which, because you mentioned earlier on in your comments about the media and the part they play in this as well. And for me personally, as a black male, reading some of these articles or watching some of these pundits on TV, I feel like it's sort of like one bracket. It's like a bracket of ways in which you can describe a black player, and there's a bracket of ways in which you can describe a white player. And it feels like whenever it's a black player involved, it's the same old repetitive sort of jargon. Oh, he's powerful, he's strong, he's quick, he's athletic, he's this, he's that. Like you said it yourself, JJ Okocha is like one of the most technically gifted players we've seen in this league. Like some of the black players we've had in this league are some of the most technically gifted players.
Sorry to interrupt about JJ, but just mentioning him, but he's clever. That's the first thing I'd say about him. He's very... or intelligent is the better word. Yeah. He's so clever, and it talks about in the book. He was made Bolton captain by Sam Allardyce because he spoke so many languages. Remember that Bolton team with Djorkaeff, those guys.
Yeah. Arsenal nemesis.
He spoke all the languages, so he was captain. And it wasn't just that he was the fastest guy on the wing or whatever. The stereotype. I agree. It's awful, really, and people just can't help themselves for some reason. I don't know why. I hear it every day from white pundits. It's just you go to that stereotype. Kante, for example, probably the most intelligent player in the league, isn't he? Probably, I think, because his positioning and knows where to have to intercept. Also, he's got that physical ability to track back, but and catch up or whatever. But I don't know. Yeah, I agree. It's a massive stereotype, and it's really and Pogba always gets it as well, doesn't he? With and Pogba's number one ability is not his pace and his power. Is his
exactly
blind spot. That pass the other day, I like watching. I'm not a big Man United fan, to be honest, but I just like watching him play. He's always got something different about him, isn't he? He's
We had this. It's funny you mentioned Pogba as well, because we had this argument in one of our group chats about Paul Pogba, and one of our friends was saying that Paul Pogba is like the best athlete and whatnot, etc., etc. And someone like Kevin De Bruyne, he may not look it, but we said that Kevin De Bruyne was by far and away a superior athlete to Paul Pogba, and he was just refusing to hear it. And I think a part of that is because what he sees in front of him is a tall black man. And he's thinking Kevin De Bruyne surely can't be more athletic than this guy, even though Kevin De Bruyne probably covers more distances, probably clocks faster speeds than Paul Pogba as well. So it's just that stereotyping that we sort of have to overcome.
Yeah,
I think he's the best example that I can think of. But, like he physically looks like the stereotype, but he's nothing like that. He's got an amazing touch for someone so big. But yeah, I think it's just the sort of thing that we, hopefully people, what's going on at the moment, people will start thinking about that kind of thing before they speak, and not just referring to the old trope. It's almost a trope, really, isn't it? It's, and throughout the book, there's lots of examples of that. I'm sure you guys have experienced it.
Yeah. And I think as well, in your book as well, there seemed to be some sort of allegiances with Ghana. So was there anything that particularly about sort of going there or researching there that made you fall in love with Ghana?
Is that why you wore your Nigeria top today, then?
To be honest,
as a protest.
The first thing that I could read.
I've been getting quite a lot of beef from Nigerian people for not having a Nigerian player on the cover of the book.
Yeah,
that's outrageous.
Yeah. Having JJ in particular as well. I
thought we had I think you even mentioned in your book that we have the highest representation of African players in the Premier League, didn't we? Nigerians.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, by far as well. I can't remember these. I think Senegal's second now. We're catching up quickly, but I can't remember. Yeah. So by far. Yeah. So no. To be honest with you, I do have an affinity with Ghana, but don't and also with South Africa because I lived there and I used to know a lot about their team, but they're not very good now. And Ghana was just at the time, everyone being in Africa at that time, it was if you remember that World Cup, everyone just got behind Ghana.
Yeah.
And
they did.
But also, when I was a kid, I say in my book, I used to play on Sensible World of Soccer as Ghana.
Yeah, I read that as well.
Yabawa, really, and do you remember Nee Lamptey as well? He was he was billed as the next wonder kid, and it's an awful story. He got abused and stuff by his dad, and and taken advantage of, really, which is obviously another thing that happens to a lot of African kids that come to Europe. There's we only hear about the success stories, but there's hundreds of kids that end up with someone on the streets because they sold a dream. And they end up just
it's interesting that you mentioned that. We did a podcast, I think, earlier this season or late last season, with a Nigerian journalist who was writing about a similar story in Al Jazeera about a particular Nigerian player who's pretty much stuck in Eastern Europe because there's some agent that's been coming to sort of some of the villages and local areas where kids play in Nigeria to sort of recruit them to come play, and live out their dreams in Europe. And this guy, he went out, had a few calls with him, put his story out in Al Jazeera, and managed to actually bring him back to his family back in Nigeria. So that was a real sort of positive outcome from one of those situations. From
there's I have to give it a plug because there's a really good book if you want to read more about it. Something called The Lost Boys. And it's by another Ed. He's called Ed Hawkins, and it came out a couple of years ago. But it's really interesting, and it's sad actually. Kids have sold a dream, and their families give up everything just to get their boy to Europe. It's really bad, really, really sad. So.
Yeah, it is, and to be honest, that's a serious issue, which I'm hoping some of the sort of world football organizations can sort of clamp down on as well. I think that was something which that journalist was mentioning as well. But back on your affinity for Ghana, Jordan Ayew recently made the news the other day because obviously he is now the all-time Ghanaian top scorer in the Premier League, and obviously he surpassed Tony Yeboah. So my next question to you is just a friendly question, and it's not just to you, it's for everyone here. Where would you even rank Jordan Ayew amongst the Ghanaian strikers to play in this league?
Well, you know who I support, don't you? So, Crystal Palace. You know what? I've seen a lot of Jordan this season, and I've always actually quite rated him. I know a lot of people haven't, but he's got he's a unique player. I really like watching. He reminds me a little bit of, and not the skills obviously, but the upper body strength of Balassi. He just holds people off, especially when we're winning, when Palace are winning the game. he takes the ball in the corner, try and get the ball off Jordan Ayew is impossible because he's just so strong and skillful, at holding it off. So yeah, I've been so impressed with him this season. Also playing like 2 different positions, like almost a free role. And he's like, to be honest, he's outshone Zaha this season by far.
Yeah, he has.
And really, I think he's got a lot of talent, and it's good to see that he's using it now because he's kind of been in and out all the time, hasn't he? Like with his career. But his dad's in the book quite a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They never played in England. He was one of the first African players to win the European Cup or Champions League, and I kind of wanted to get something in about him, because I think he was quite an influential player, and also the fact that, he came from an English-speaking country like Ghana, or there wasn't a pathway for Abidi Pele because he was just before Peter Ndlovu. And, at that time, even if you were from an English-speaking African country, you didn't come to England, you went to France or somewhere else because, there just wasn't an option. So, but in terms of Jordan Ayew, anyway, I think he could get better and better, and that's a great achievement, to surpass Yeboah. I mean, he made such an impact and was a brilliant player, and hopefully he'll stay at Palace for a bit. He was only £3 million, by the way, wasn't he? Last season.
Because you bought him from Swansea, right?
Yeah, I remember me and my friends chatting about him on our groups and stuff, and just everyone just laughing and stuff.
Yeah, we did that as well. We did as well.
I didn't.
Yes, you did.
I'm a liar.
Yes, you did.
You know what it was? I always found him to be inconsistent. I always thought
he's always had the tech.
I thought his brother was the better of the two. But as their careers have gone on, it seems like I don't know if I'd say Jordan's a more talented player than Andre, but I think he's better equipped for the Premier League, perhaps. He could be doing really well.
Sorry to use that word, but it is a unique physical. It's not like he's not that fast or anything. He's just got this look at his body. It's quite a long body. He sort of leans it into people. I watch him quite a lot. So and the other day, obviously, he's added the finishing that he's got. That.
I think that's what I was going to say. I think he's always someone who's shown that he's got good technique when the ball's at his feet and stuff. Even at Swansea, some of the goals that he's scoring shows that he's got ability, but he was never able to do that on a consistent basis. And I can't remember who it was against, but he scored basically one of the contenders for goal of the season this year when he's done the 360.
I was against West Ham.
I was literally to seeing that from Jordan Ayew is not actually that surprising necessarily, because that he's got that in the locker, but it's the fact that he's now scored 9 goals this season. I'm wow, if you said, because we actually had a bet as well at the start of the season, how many goals combined the Palace strikers would score, because we saw Ayew, Benteke, Connor Wickham, and I can't remember.
That was it.
And we said they were going to get 8. Not including Zaha. We said 8 goals combined between those 3 players. So he's just shut us all up. Yeah, he shut us all up this season.
So, but just quickly on Benteke, he's been playing really well and improving and trying, which is the main thing. He wasn't really trying. It's not coming with the goals yet. But with Jordan, I think his confidence is unbelievably high at the moment, and so he's trying all those things that he's able to do. I asked Kiyate about that goal, and he was like, it was like his dad, and we couldn't believe he'd done it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
They obviously, when I asked him about his dad, he was in awe of him, Kiyate, because he's a real African legend.
Yeah, and the thing is, I feel like with Jordan and with Andre as well, I think they get that sort of technical quality from their dad. When everyone always looks at them and they always say, "Oh yeah, it's not surprising that they've got X and Y, Z," because their dad was Abedi Pele as well. So I think with them, it's almost an expectation that they should have some level of technical quality. But like you said, like Stephen said, and like Dan said, it's all about channeling it out consistently. He scored an absolute rocket for Aston Villa, like 4 or 5 years ago. I think that was his only goal, and it was a ridiculous. I vividly remember it against Newcastle. He cut in, and he's absolutely smashed it top bins. I will never forget that goal, and I was like, wow. like unbelievable goal, and then he just does nothing else for the rest of the season. That was the issue.
Yeah, I think
it's interesting though, being a son, and I've got a bit of a chapter about this. It's about the sort of the number of sons of African players that have done quite well. If you look, look at Sane's dad was a great player in Germany.
Yeah.
He was a sort of a pioneer in Germany as well, at the same time as Yeboah. And then people like Divock Origi, which that's the person I concentrate on because his dad was a real pioneer too. But it's quite hard, being the son of a player. Look at the number of famous sons of whatever country you're from. Like it's tough following in the footsteps of someone like that. But so maybe someone like Jordan is maturing into himself, and he's nothing like his dad really because he plays it a bit, he's more further forward, but he uses his physicality really well and his strengths well. I think that's what Roy Hodgson's getting the best out of him.
Yeah, he is. I was gonna just to go back to your book as well. So there was I think it was one of the latter chapters as well where it was you're actually mentioning some of the actual historical African players who have their sons playing in the Premier League as well. But one player who you actually referenced in the book, and he actually gave a few quotes, was John Salako. And John Salako was basically talking about how obviously he was born in Nigeria, but then he moved to England after his dad got killed or something like that. And when it was time to actually decide who he wanted to play for, he didn't want to play for Nigeria, and instead he wanted to play for England. And I was going to ask, why do you think it is that sort of like African-born players have some sort of allegiance towards sort of the parent country that's raised them, as opposed to the country in which their parents were actually brought up in, and which is within part like their ancestral sort of blood?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think it's becoming more and more pertinent at the moment. Like, just more and more people are, the world's like a smaller place and people are moving around more often and that kind of thing. And yeah, it's a really different one. Salako is a good example because he was so early. But like, to remember, I don't know if you're probably guys too young to remember him, but before he had his first injury, he was like almost as good as Ian Wright. Like, I'm not joking.
Yeah, I've heard he was actually really good.
They weren't happy to let Ian Wright go, but they had to because the offer was so big. But Salako was like going to fill in, and he did his knee. I think it was the first game of the season or the first game after Ian Wright had been sold anyway, and he was never quite the same player. So in his case, the chance to play for England, where he kind of grew up and learned his football, I think I can understand that. If like a player is born in a country, even if they're not born in a country, but you go to school somewhere and you like grow up, like somebody like I'm trying to think, somebody like Chalobah, who was the first England player born in Africa to play in a competitive match. I know he only played one match, but it was a Nations League game. Someone like him, I think he came in when he was about 5 from Sierra Leone, and grow up in England, and you probably feel a bit Sierra Leonean as well, but you feel a bit English. And if you have the chance to play for England, then I think that's most people's, first choice. But at the same time, you can understand if you want, even if you're not born if you're born in England and your parents are from Africa, there's a strong pull. Obviously there is, and I don't think anyone could begrudge you if you decided, say, if Tammy Abraham decided to play for, it's too late now for him. But if he decided to play for Nigeria, like, there's a lot of pressure on him to do that, I think, because his dad's mates with the guy at the Nigerian Federation, and they tried their best a lot. They were putting out stories and everything that they got him and things. So yeah, you can understand either way. Like Zaha is the obvious example that
that was a big one, yeah.
And it's one of my big bugbears that he's not playing for England, because we obviously, I think a couple of years ago anyway, he would definitely have boosted England. At the World Cup, if we'd had Zaha on the bench, it would have been lovely, or even starting the game. But he made that decision, and it was his decision because, in his case, I think it was partly because he was born there, and his family, he's very devoted to his family, and he loves being Ivorian. And also, he feels that he was messed around a little bit by England, I think. And,
he did an interview on that, I think. Yeah,
he has. Yeah, he's talked about it quite a lot. And I know people at England, and they've told me what happened. And Gareth Southgate's talked about it, and it's a real shame because obviously with the Palace link with Southgate and everything, you hope that he would have, he knew about Wilf way back. So it's a shame that it didn't happen. But it's up to the individual, isn't it, to make a choice. And the advantages of playing for England, I suppose, are money and convenience and fame.
Better opportunity of winning something, fame. I guess.
At the same time, you asked Victor Moses about going back to Nigeria and how he was on the cusp of England as well, and then chose Nigeria, or thought maybe Nigeria's a bet for me. But Victor was born in Nigeria, and everyone knows his backstory, very sad. And for him to go back and win the AFCON with them, I think that's definitely the highlight of his career. Forget winning the Premier League. I think if he was honest, he would say definitely the AFCON, because it must mean a lot to him.
I think as well, like the way some of these African FAs actually interact with the players, and it's like recently Nigeria. Not paying for some of the flights, not paying for hotels, that kind of thing. Like saying the new manager has to sign his contract and get paid in Nigerian currency and that kind of thing. Like I'm almost not surprised when sort of some players reject their sort of country of birth to go play for other countries, because it's almost like the way they'd be treated would probably be nicer. I don't know, from what you hear about how like Nigerian FA or some of these other African countries move around, like sort of compensating the players and treating them around tournaments and stuff. So I do agree. Yeah, it's 100% a personal level, but I think sometimes the football associations do have some culpability as well.
Yeah, I'd probably think if it was me personally as well, I'd be wondering how I'd fit in as well. Say, for instance, I'd lived in England my whole life and I got asked to link up with the Ghana team. If I didn't feel particularly strong affinity to the Ghanaian team, I don't think I'd be comfortable going in for it might be a week or just under 2 weeks with a group of lads that you don't think you're going to get on very well with, or you don't think you have much in common with. So I think that plays a big factor into things as well.
Yeah,
it's interesting because I know Albert Adoma quite well, and he, he's got a great story that he was like doing a painting and decorating course, and then got into football through just being good.
That's so right.
Like from Park Football from West London, I think he's from, and but I think he grew up with quite a Ghanaian household.
Yeah.
So when he got called up for Ghana, he was like, "Well, I'm gonna obviously I think he might have been there a few times on holiday or whatever." But so I think you can quite easily, I imagine if you grow up in an African family and you're quite used to the culture and But I was hoping that to mention actually that there's a statue now of Arthur Wharton at St George's Park, which is really that's a good thing for like young kids, like people like Tammy Abraham maybe, or young kids coming through with African heritage, to see that at the England headquarters. And it wasn't easy to get it there. So the story is like full of battles, as you can imagine, to get there. But in a time when we're talking about statues all the time, well, maybe not so much as last week, but that's something like that we can be proud of, I think.
Yeah, I did read that as well, and I thought there were some other statues as well in I can't remember which offices.
Yeah, like
headquarters, FIFA. Yeah. On that as well, though, because it's interesting, because I wanted to ask on some sort of, I wanted to focus on some of the younger sort of African-born players who are sort of making waves now, and I just wanted to touch on one. Whether you feel they could actually make an impact in English football in years to come, and two, where their allegiances should lie. So like someone like, let's say, Chukwueze as well, who plays for Villarreal, like he's someone who's already pledged his allegiance to Nigeria. He's one who many Nigerians and many sort of African-based, African-directed sort of journos tip to have a bright future. But then in England, you have someone like, let's say, Eze, who plays for QPR. He's not been capped at a competitive level yet for any country as well. He's one of the players who they're saying could take the Premier League by storm. He's yet to actually commit to either England or Nigeria as well. So in that situation, one, what I was going to ask is, what does he actually have to think about here? Does he have to go with, England, better opportunity, or Nigeria, better opportunity of breaking into the first team, etc., or England, better opportunity of probably winning something on the sort of like the big stage?
Yeah, it's a really tough question for someone like that who's like, at this stage, you don't know how good he's going to be. But I mean, I'm a big fan of him. I'd love Palace to sign him, for example, but it's the sort of player they never go for.
Can't afford him.
Well, no, probably not. But no, it's the sort of player they need, I think, especially, well, I don't think he's up anyway. But on him, I think it's a matter of waiting and seeing, isn't it? Like, you don't want to commit too early because, I don't know, I mean, he grew up in London, didn't he, where he's obviously Nigerian heritage. So I think it's a tough one to decide for someone so young, isn't it? There's a bit in my book actually about with Lucas Redeby from Leeds. Their number of injuries and problems he had like in his career, obviously because he was a defender, and that's just comes with the position. But he reckons it was really like made worse from all the travelling he had to do, like back and forth to play qualifiers in Africa, all the way back to South Africa. Obviously, is a massive 30-hour flight. So and it takes its toll on you. International breaks, like going to AFCON, going back to, that's like every 2 or 3 months, and then also AFCON being every 2 years is a big factor compared to the European players. If you think they only play Euros every 4 years, so that's and that's, I think that's a massive issue for African football. Actually, they should try and resolve it. But obviously, money talks, and that's why they have it every 2 years.
Yeah, they even moved it back to Liverpool fans wouldn't like it as well. But obviously, they moved it back to January, which isn't.
Funnily enough, that's how my book begins, and I was a bit annoyed when they moved it back. It was not going. Yeah, I love the fact we've got so many African players, apart from when the African Nations Cup's on. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm really pleased that it's moved now." And this was just after I come back from Egypt, actually, after that. And then obviously that news, and he went mad. I knew he was going to go mad. But they're shooting themselves in the foot, aren't they? And I suppose after this as well, he was like, he just couldn't believe it. He was so angry. He was like, why don't they ask the players what we want to do? And he's like, they're committed to their clubs, and they're like, they want to do their best for the clubs, and then they have to leave mid-season. Like next year, we're going to see it. They're all going to go in January to Cameroon if it happens.
Do you know what the reason was for them moving it back? Because I thought it would just be beneficial for everyone if it's in summer, so like more people are inclined to watch it and stuff like that. If it's not clashing with club football as well. I
think it was weather related this time, and like because in Egypt, ridiculously hot, but they made it work. The football suffered as a result because it was like 45 degrees. So that's the issue, isn't it? Like unless you have it in southern Africa every year, then you have to have it in in sweltering heat or in monsoons as well. That's what it is, I think, in Cameroon at that time of year, monsoons. So that's an issue. But having it every 4 years, maybe that would make it a bit less of a headache.
Yeah. So Ed, obviously 2 more questions. So the next question, similarly, the next question is basically just off the back of what I just asked earlier on. So I mentioned Chukwueze and Eze, but I wanted to ask if there were any sort of young, sort of African-born players who you think are going to sort of dominate not just English football but world football in the next sort of, let's say, 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, there's loads. I love Chukwueze, by the way. I didn't say anything about him. I watched him at AFCON for the first time live, and he was amazing. He's really raw as well.
He lacks end product.
Yeah, but that's the thing about him, and I love these sort of players, and you don't know how it's going to end up, but ones who I know he's come through a bit of a system, but he's very raw, and he's only had he's not had that long at the highest level, and he's already looking amazing. And so once he has a bit more refines it a bit, he should be really good. So, but then there's a sort of new generation, I think, of African players that have been picked up very young by these European clubs, and particularly. I'm thinking Red Bull Salzburg and the Red Bull system and things like that, and some in France as well, and Belgium obviously. But so particularly Patson Daka, who's at Red Bull Salzburg, scoring goals for fun. He's sort of replaced Haaland there since he went to Dortmund. And he's scoring it almost as many goals as him. And then also same team, Sekou Koita, he's from Mali. Amadou Haidara, who plays for RB Leipzig. There's lots of Mali and Zambians coming through, but and lots of good young Nigerians as well. The best thing about it, I think, is that this kind of the pool is increasing. Like, there's lots more different countries that are producing really good players, and the standard in general is going up.
Yeah, I was even gonna mention. I know obviously he's playing at under 21 level for Spain, but Ansu Fati at Barcelona. Obviously, he of course he's gonna probably claim Spanish nationality, but like he's someone who I look at, and I think obviously he's. I think he's got like, is it from Guinea? I think he's from Guinea. I have a Guinea.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Guinean,
yeah. And I think, yeah, exactly. And I think he's someone who might go on to sort of dominate world football over the next 5 or 6 years as well.
There's another one actually I wanted to mention, which is really timely because he became the youngest player for Bayern, and this also connects to the nationality. He became the ice cream van. He became the youngest player for Bayern in the Bundesliga at the weekend. He's called Jamal Musiala. His dad is Nigerian and his mum is German. But he was born in Germany, but he grew up in South London. So he's played for England and he's played for Germany, and it's going to be a big tug of war. But I mean, the youngest player ever for Bayern in the Bundesliga is pretty phenomenal achievement.
I just googled him now. Googled him now, and he looks so young. Like he looks like a proper baby.
He's supposed to be a sort of Dele Alli style midfielder, or striker midfielder, or attacking midfielder. Yeah. So maybe him as well.
It's really frustrating, I think, from an Arsenal perspective, is seeing how well Chukwueze's done at Villarreal, because I remember when I think it was maybe 3-4 years ago when we were supposed to sign him and Nwakali at the same time, and I remember seeing pictures of like Kanu and Arsenal negotiators all standing there posing with their contracts and stuff like that. And I think we could only sign Nwakali and not Chukwueze because of like work permit issues or something like that. And then it seems that, Nwakali, the one that we did sign, has not actually managed to, live up to their potential. And Chukwueze, is going up for like 40-50 million being touted in summer. But obviously I'm happy for him from a Nigerian perspective, but frustrating.
Yeah. I've heard that Klopp's quite a big fan of Chukwueze.
Yeah, I've heard that as well.
So we'll see. I think his agent's quite keen for him to take like the right step here, because it's he's obviously at a very high level, but is he ready to go to the very top level?
Nah.
I don't know.
Maybe not yet. I don't think so. Another one as well. I know obviously we've moved on from the international chat, but it's just coming to my head now. Adama Traore. He's obviously one who I think he's either looking to play for Spain, and it's just like obviously of course has he played already? Yeah,
definitely played youth football for them. Yeah.
And I don't know. As I said, for me, I get the rationale, but Balotelli, I know he was thinking a bit too. He was a bit too idealistic in what he said, but he posted some tweet probably like a few weeks back saying, "Imagine if all the African players sort of pooled their money together and started like these leagues in Africa, and where you could sort of build the players up and make all those leagues in Africa sort of like the most competitive leagues ever, etc., etc." And it just, of course, that's way too idealistic. But then it just makes me think on a national level. Can you imagine all the countries that have missed out on all these sort of players who have played for like your Frances, your Spains, your Englands, your Portugals? All of these players, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, well, Ross Barkley is one that that really annoys me as well. He should be playing for Nigeria.
Who?
Ross Barkley.
Yeah.
He should be playing for Nigeria.
People don't realise that about Ross Barkley, do they? I think Ross Barkley is really good player actually. It's popular to knock him, but I think he's good. He's got a lot of ability. But
you're not going to hear much from us there. In agreement.
You don't like him?
I think he's okay.
I think he's all right. I think he's similar to all the Chelsea midfielders in that they don't particularly stand out to me. They're fairly good. I think him and Loftus-Cheek. I don't think any of them are exceptional. I don't find Jorginho particularly great either. And I think Kovacic is probably the pick out of the bunch if you look past Kante, but I don't think he's amazing either.
For me, though, I think with Barkley, I think he's got all the ability. It's just his decision making, I think, is what lets him down a lot of the time. Like he gets into a lot of good positions and then chooses to shoot rather than pass at key moments and stuff. And I think that's what holds him back.
When he's full of, it's a confidence thing as well. I think with him, when he's full of confidence, he's kind of unstoppable because he's got everything. You know, if he could, be more consistent, he will. But going back to that, just wanted to make the point that in the book, at the end of the book, I kind of wanted to end it like on. I did an interview with a guy that runs the Diambar's Academy, which was set up with funding from Vieira in Senegal. And they produce a lot of players there, and they're getting they're getting it right in Senegal. Like they're a small country, population-wise, like 15 million, but they're producing ridiculous amount of players. And he was just talking about how unfair the system is. The transfer system is still it's weighted against African clubs and academies because, like, you know, the best player best young player in Brazil goes for like 50 million euros, but the best young player in Africa goes for like 1% of that, like €500,000 euros. Like that. And he says there's not respect. There's still not respect for African clubs and academies, and I actually asked him, like, is that a legacy of, you know, like slavery basically and everything, you know, that's happened over the last few hundred years? And he was like, yeah, basically it is, I think, and it's trying to level it up again. And this is what is going on at the moment, isn't it? It's just another example of, like, you know, history really, and like the legacy of colonialism, I suppose. But that's something that hopefully, you know, in the next few years, when people like Ismail Assar, I haven't mentioned him tonight with you guys, but he's
another really good player as well. Exactly.
I think I don't want to like put my neck on. I've said it loads though recently. He's going to be a superstar every time I see him. Just, you know, he's the person who ended Liverpool's unbeaten run. It was just lovely. My storyline for the book that happened because he's got the same academy as Mane, and it just shows you, like, given the opportunities, there's so much talent out there in Africa. They just need to be given the opportunity to, you know, to develop and look what happens.
100%.
So sorry, Ed. I think just the last question before we go. And again, in case we haven't plugged it, Ed's book is actually called "Made in Africa." It's available now on. It's available on Amazon. I got it on Amazon Prime anyway, so yeah, just go buy that and check it out. It's a really cool book. Because you mentioned in your book as well that 278 players have played. 278 African players have played in the Premier League. But I wanted to ask you, who has been your best player, and take Tony Yeboah out of it as well, because I think you've spoken about Tony Yeboah. Because I think take him out of it.
Is it a personal choice? Personal choice. Okay, because like I think there's no doubt really. If you look at the statistics, it's between two players really, and it's like Yaya Toure and Didier Drogba. Probably, you know, league titles, FA Cups. I was actually put on the spot on Ghanaian TV the other day. Like, who's the best midfielder in the Premier League? Is it Yaya Toure or Michael Essien? And they were like, is it Michael Essien? No, he was brilliant as well. No, I think he was class.
He was class. I think he would have gone. I know obviously Yaya scored the goals, but I think if he didn't have his injury, he would have got. We would be talking about him in a higher class than we talk about Yaya Toure, in my opinion. Yeah,
and he beat Drogba to win in Chelsea. The first African player to win Chelsea's Player of the Year was Essien, and you know, it was interesting when I spoke to Essien. It was at the Soccer Aid thing last year at Stamford Bridge, and Drogba was there, and like everyone wanted to talk to him because he's obviously a legend. But Essien was just there, like I think he'd had a training session, and no one was like paying him any attention. And I just sat there, I had a chat with him for like half an hour, just like talking about where they used to go in London, like they used to go to Peckham, Camberwell, to the, you know, all those clubs down there, like African clubs and stuff, and just talking about that sort of thing. He's a really nice guy. But yeah, my favourite player, I don't know. Oh, it's really hard to. I love Lucas as well. Lucas Redeby is just like a king of a man, isn't he? Really, you can't like, not respected, but
he would have been. He wouldn't be my pick.
I think if I had to pick one, I would go for. It would probably be Sadio Mane. I think. Okay. I don't know what you guys think. But he's kind of underrated, even though everyone knows he's like amazing. But still think he's a bit underrated. He and should have been in the top 3 of the Ballon d'Or.
100%.
Yeah, for sure.
100%. I think you know what, I like that. I like Sadio Mane. I thought you'd have said something sort of like safe and conservative, like John Obi Mikel or something like that, because he won X amount of league titles with Chelsea. Yeah, man. You know, some Chelsea fans will tell me Mikel's the best ever African to play in the Premier League. I've actually heard that before.
Well, it's interesting because I've talked about I didn't speak to him or anything in the book, but I obviously mentioned him as part of the Drogba and SCN bit, and he was. I think it was quite an important transfer. His one because obviously you remember the
United War, yeah.
Remember it was. I think it was about 2004 or something like that. I could double check that, but it was a sign that African players were like in vogue then, wasn't it? It was like you know the best young kid from Nigeria, like the 2 biggest teams in England, basically fighting out.
Yeah. Didn't they? Wasn't it like I can't remember, but at the time it was quite like a substantial fee as well. I can't remember how
they
much
had to pay compensation.
They pay us over 10 million or something.
Yeah, it was quite dodgy as well the way that it all happened. Anyway, he was at Lynn, wasn't he, in Norway? That shows you pathways that back then. It's not even that long ago, but it's like some strange routes. But now it's a bit more developed, and you know, some European clubs are really on it and they know what they're doing now. Whereas English clubs kind of got the money to wait and just buy them when they're tearing.
Yeah. Well, Ed, thank you for coming on. That was really enlightening as well. And it was actually quite fun because it's not every day you get to spend a whole podcast talking about all the African players in the Premier League as well.
That was good. Thank you.
That was really good. I think that's it for us today. But we'd love to have you on another time if you're free as well. Before we end the podcast, I was just going to ask to see if you wanted to sort of plug any sort of socials, your book again, etc., just for people's awareness.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate you taking the interest in it. It's really good to speak to you guys about this because I think it's an important time that we're living through at the moment, and hopefully. This book, the whole thing began with a friend of mine who lives in Birmingham who did this as a school project, which was called Out of Africa, and he had some lottery funding and stuff like that. And I think that's what we want, to happen. I'm not saying that everyone should read my book in school and stuff, but things like this really help. I think to spread the word because there's not enough things like that out there, and hopefully people will be able to. Find out about things that they didn't know about, and you can see sort of the environment that has been created for the modern players, and where even the modern players, what they've had to go through to get to where they are now. Yeah. So if you do read it, I hope you enjoy it. And thanks again, guys. It's been good.
Thank you. Well, if you're still listening, make sure to follow us on TapIn Football on all social platforms as well. Thank you for listening, also, and we'll be back soon. Take care.